Welcome to Everything with Everett. This is a talk show podcast hosted by Everett McConaughey from Boise, Idaho. The purpose of this production is to share thoughts, voices, and information to further a discussion on who we are as individuals, communities, and a global society. Everything with Everett is open to all topics of discussion: faith, science, history, finances, social issues, and, well, everything. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Visit everettpodcast.com for all the details.
Did you hear that new voice? That's Molly Miklos of Voiceovers by Molly, LLC. Voiceovers by Molly, LLC is ready to collaborate with you to create the best voice for your project. Molly's voice is professional and clear, warm and friendly, with a versatile twist, capable of snarky and sassy. Molly has a wide range of voice styles to provide a plethora of moods for your TV, radio, and character projects. Contact Molly today. She wants to collaborate with you. All the information is on her website, voiceoversbymolly.com. Thank you for inviting me into your drive, your space, wherever we are that you hit play. I'm happy to be with you. So, who is your cell phone carrier? That seems to be kind of a triggering question to some. Maybe you love your carrier. Maybe you are looking for something a little bit different. Maybe it feels a little bit stagnant. Today, I want to share with you my cell phone story, my frustrations, things that I enjoyed, things that became old, and kind of the journey I've taken in the landscape of wireless cell phone service, calling, texting, and data. So my experience started a while ago, and before I get too far into that, I do want to preface this entire episode in the text that I have on the podcast playlist. There is a link for the current cell carrier that I'm with. I'm providing the link. It gives you a discount if you choose to join. And if you use my code, you and I will get $5 of service, or service for $5 a month for that month. And it's just a little bit of a deal that they offer to every customer. I am not being compensated or anything for this episode. So this is my personal experience. Everything is all me. I felt moved by my current experience to share kind of what I've gone through and my thoughts on things. So I just want to throw this out there. I am not being paid for this. I am not being anything. Like I said, the promotion code is just something that they offer everybody as a customer, and that is mine. I'm offering it to you because why not? So I'm not being paid by any carrier. I'm not bashing any carrier. I'm just sharing my experience with carriers that I have used in the lifetime of my cell phone number. So, my current number, which you guys don't have, I'm so sorry. I have my personal cell phone number that I carry with me. I very rarely give it out because all of my other numbers funnel into it. So I like to control who actually knows my cell phone number. But, the numbers that I give people, they ring through to my actual cell phone, so I can answer them on the go. I can manipulate with them, text, all that. So no one's any wiser. I just like to protect the actual number that is my device. It's a cell phone number that I have had since 2005. I've prided myself on that. So, needless to say, if you're like an old friend from high school and you ever got my number back in high school, my sophomore, junior year of high school. It's the same number. Anyway, so I have had it continuously since 2005, which is pretty cool. We went through a phase where everyone was just like getting a new number every couple months. Hashtag new number, who this? Anyway, so the cell phone number that I have, again, has been on since 2005. Initially, it was started by, it was on a plan that was my father's wife had. She was with Verizon, and we all got like with the family plan thing. Then they separated. We ended up taking our numbers. So my father, my sister, and myself, our numbers got chunked out of that into our own Verizon account. So it was on Verizon from 2005 through 2012. And then we never had any issues. It was always great service. Just, it was cell phones. We didn't really know any better. Things had a cost. Technology was much different and frankly kind of less than we have now. And my biggest issue that I have nowadays is it seems like cell service, the prices have like stayed the same. Yes, we have more, but it's also easier to offer more because it's just, we're in a different world. Like everything's data driven now. It's not analog voice or analog texting. If you have an iPhone, everything's done by data. Like your voice goes over voice, like voice over IP, VoIP. And so it's being converted from audio into a digital data packet sent through a network and then decoded on the other end. So everything is digitized now. It's not old school analog lines like we had back in the 2G and 3G days. 4G was kind of the beginning of that hybrid, and 5G is, really just more, it's all data now. So I feel like there's less components that go into a cell network compared to, those original founding days when they had to operate analog radios, and it was just a different beast back then. But I feel like prices have stayed relatively close to what they have always been, and I think that that's kind of a problem. Let me pull up some websites of some carriers. So while I'm doing that, apparently I can't type and talk at the same time. Wireless, Verizon Wireless. Okay. And they've, changed their name. Like, so I used to work for Verizon. Not directly. I worked for a contractor that all we dealt with was Verizon stuff. So I wasn't with Verizon proper, but I was a tier 2 tech support person for a company for Verizon devices that was solely contracted. We adhered to Verizon's standards and security policies and all that jazz. And it was actually, it was a cool job. There was a lot to it that I did like. Obviously dealing with customers' unrealistic expectations, and then having, the store people would say, oh yeah, you can do this. Like, it'll just take some time. And then the customer is like, hey, this never happened. And then having to break it to them that, hey, the salesperson at the store lied to you. That's not a thing. Like, and then suddenly, we, the call center people, are getting it taken out on us and getting the failing surveys that then go into our job. Because the people at the store that were making the commission set the customer up for a fail. Anyway, so that is a whole nother beast in and of itself. Okay, let me get the different lines, because you know how they have it, like where all the different plans are, like everything looks great, but then when you start actually dialing it in, goodness gracious. Like they show you this great price and it's like, oh, that's great. And then it's like, oh, but that's for 4 devices. Well, unless you're moving an entire family, you're not going to get a hell of a deal. Okay, so I've got them up. So Verizon, I was with them. Again, prices were pretty close to what they are now. They have gone down. Verizon has changed quite a bit. Obviously, the contracts are gone. I was under a contract in my phone. I ended up breaking that in 2012. So when I was in training, we had to go through a billing understanding of kind of what the breakdown of billing is. And I guess if I had looked at our family's phone bill, I would have figured it out. But anyway, I wasn't paying for it. Whatever. I had no clue what all the different line items and fees and taxes were. And one thing that really kind of irked me, knowing that people were paying for this and me being a young person at that point, not that I'm old now, but whatever. Anyway, I was in my early 20s and we went through this billing class and they showed like I get phone service costs money. I'm not saying that phones should be free or that service should be, free, but let's really pass on the true cost and not profit on the backs of, single customers, people that are working hard to afford something. Like cell phones are a necessity these days. It's not a luxury. It's not just like whatever. We need cell phones, so it needs to be affordable. And anyway, so what irked me on this billing class was cell phone plans, because unlimited wasn't a thing. So it was still, you had to pick your data plan, 5 gigs, whatever. And that was a lot back then because, heck, I remember when we still had smartphones were around, like the idea that you could use 2 gigabits of data wirelessly was like, oh my God, what are you doing? Nowadays, you blow through it in a week streaming something. Like the landscape of cell phones has changed. So in this class, we learned that some plans were like $60, which is fine. That pays for your data plan. It was shared with the family, whatever. So you picked your data package or your family plan. But then each line had to, so say it was just me and I'm signing up for Verizon at the time. I wanted, this data plan, this many minutes, text, whatever. You pick the package that suits your needs or that you can afford. So say it's $60. If I have a smartphone, I have to pay a $35 access fee. That's what they called it, an access fee. And if you had a basic phone, it was a $20 access fee. Obviously, you're not going to pick a plan with like a bunch of data if you have a smartphone because there was totally 2 different types of mobile data back then. There's, internet browsing, and then there was like an optimized or basic phone type internet. So those plans were much smaller. They had more of a basic plan. So that's part of the cost going up is now they're providing actual internet versus like aggregated data interface. So I get that's some of the cost. But the frustrating part was that you had to pick your data plan, so $60, $65, whatever, plus the $35 access fee. And the way it was explained was the $65 was your data plan. So that's what you could use in a month. That was how many texts you could send, how much time you could talk on the phone, how much data you could browse with. Obviously, you had overages. So if you went over your data allowance, it was like $10 a gig or something. And it was a partial amount. So if you use like 0.02 of a gig over, you got charged the full amount. So you might as well just use up the whole, but then make sure you don't bump into the next gig because then you'll get another overage cost. So you had your actual services that you paid for. And then this access fee was labeled as almost like an administrative type cost. The way it was explained was that the $35 allowed your device to access the services that you were also paying for, if that makes sense. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And that after the week end of that week of class, that's when I terminated my service with Verizon. So anyone at Verizon listening, that's when that went down. And mind you, I worked for that company for a while. And anyway, so I was like, are you serious? So in a way to think about it is, if the actual like network connection for your phone to be hooked up to the radio that is the cell tower, that was $35. And then so that's like buying a plate in the buffet. And now you have a plate and some silverware that gives you access to the bar. But then you have to pay an additional amount, the $65. And that is the offerings that you use or lose or whatever from the buffet. And I don't see, like, I get that there's a cost to operating and maintaining a cellular network and a tower infrastructure. And obviously, if you're just charging costs, you're not going to really be able to keep up with new technology, research and development, kind of like really go through. But at the same time, like, not everybody is using the full bandwidth of their plans. Like, everything kind of needs to be set up to where there's that kind of margin. There's that fudge room of your customers aren't like using the full extent of the network. And that's where you can kind of profit from the overages that you're kind of charging, and then slowly let that money accumulate. And then bam, you can, build new towers, update things, upgrade stuff. But I think it's getting to the point where the cell networks, we're just so used to paying such high amounts. And I feel like slowly as time goes on and my generation becomes more present in the management structure, I think things that are overpriced are coming down, because we're seeing that fine line. We're pushing that fine line. Yes, you need to make profits, but you don't need to make exorbitant profits. You need to be able to make upgrades and keep up with the future. But at the same time, if you're sucking that out of your customers, pretty soon they're going to catch on, or they're going to get tired of it. And then you can soil your name to where then you don't have customers and nobody wants to come with you. And then what's it all worth if your network collapses because nobody wants to be part of your system because you're overpriced? You charge too much. So that was why I left Verizon, was that I feel like Verizon has a history of not being transparent with things. They've definitely changed. They're a lot better than they used to be. But like, I just looked ahead of this podcast. I went to look through their YouTube channel. They only have videos that go back 3 years. And maybe they switched accounts. Maybe they were like, you know what, this YouTube thing's just a fad. We're going to get off. And then maybe 3 years ago, they're like, oh, never mind. We'll get back on it. But I looked at T-Mobile. They have videos going back all forever. And maybe, Verizon wants to pull down some of those things, keep it relevant. I get that kind of image preservation. But I also see part of the reason that drew me to T-Mobile back when I left Verizon was their transparency. The fact that they were, quote, the Un-carrier at the time. They had just started that. They were the first wireless company to end contracts, to say, you know what, bring your own device. And remember, back then, carriers didn't like you bringing your number. Carriers didn't want you bringing your own devices. And finally, the FCC was like, you know what? No, people can keep their numbers. They don't have to get a new number. So there was that Wireless Portability Act, I think, where it allows you to take your phone number. But then part of that, or along those lines, I don't know if it was in the same thing, they set it up to where you could bring your own device, because it was like you had to buy a new device that was, quote unquote, compatible with this new carrier that you wanted to be with, that maybe had a better price or better service or, whatever. Or maybe, you know, everyone in your family was on the same network. So then you could have like, you know, the free talking and texting, because that was the thing back in the day, like 20 years ago. After 9 p.m. you could talk, you know, or if you had talked to people on the same network, it didn't count against your minutes or didn't count against your texting allowance. So it was beneficial to group as many people as you knew or be on the same network as them, because then you could pay for the minimal whatever, the minimal amount of minutes or text, and that would largely only count for when, you know, work called you or a landline or, you know, the one-off family member that didn't have that network or was somewhere else. Eventually long distance went away, you know, like that used to be a cost. It's kind of crazy to realize that we're getting older and, you know, the teenagers now don't know about long distance, but the reason you have to dial a 1 before the area code, that was an old long distance dialing thing. And there was a premium that you had to pay for that. It's not a thing anymore. Like long distance dialing is just, you know, that's unheard of. Unless, like, if you call it through another country, that's still all that issue and the up charges and whatnot. But within our own continental country, you know, you're not having to pay to call, you know, Northern Idaho versus Southern Idaho or another area code. If you called another area code, that was long distance. And my parents actually said that back in the day, it was even long distance if in some places, if you called city to city, like Nampa to Boise in Idaho was long distance at one point, just because you went from one like public phone exchange to another. And I get it. Like that was that infrastructure. That was the actual cost of trying to make this thing called a phone network happen. And then you have the handoffs between, you know, cell carriers. Then they merge into the local phone company and it goes through. I know from when I worked as a 911 dispatcher, I went there after working for Verizon. If you call 911 from your cell phone, and either you hang up immediately and don't stay on the line, and your phone's disconnected, or it can't get your actual location information. If there's nothing specific to where your device actually is, or they can't call you back to get a hold of you because you're using, like, a kid's playing with a old cell phone that it doesn't have service, but it sells a battery in it, that can still make a 911 phone call. And it automatically connects through. The systems are set up to where so say I dial 911, and I'm like, oh crap, and I hit end. The cell carrier has to complete the call into the 911 center once it hits the cell tower. So if my phone stays on 911 long enough, it'll hit the tower, and then that call has to be switched all the way through into the county dispatch. If you hang up, sometimes what will happen is the dispatchers will receive the 911 phone call without whatever information the cell tower, cell network was able to give them about the phone that called them. So if it's, again, a phone that's not connected to a data plan or it doesn't have a phone number, it doesn't have a whole lot of info to give. And a lot of times it'll actually give the 911 address of the tower. So like the actual address of where the tower is standing in the county that the cell phone hit. Anyway, so that's that interface with the local telephone company is, you know, they have to work together. So at the end of the day, CenturyLink, Quest, you know, whoever the local phone Frontier, they're having to work with the wireless providers and everything's interfaced. And T-Mobile has to work with Verizon and AT&T, and they all have to work together because you're supposed to seamlessly be able to, you know, call another carrier or call another phone system. And that's how it's supposed to work. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with all that. So there's costs, data plans, all that jazz. Transparency. Yeah. I feel like T-Mobile kind of broke the ground. They became the quote uncarrier and they got rid of the contracts. I paid $135 to terminate the contract that my phone was on. Because you remember you used to have to sign a 2-year agreement. This was back in the days of the free or almost free phones. You know, at most, maybe you paid like $50 for a new device. But by signing that contract, you got a reduced price on the device, but you had to have service for 2 years. Otherwise, you were in violation of the contract. Phones obviously got smarter, and it was not economically feasible to offer them for a free with contract type deal. So I remember the first smartphone I got in 2010 was a HTC Droid Incredible. And I remember my parents were like, what? Because it required a 2-year contract on Verizon. Plus, I still had to pay like $200 for the device. And all the phones that we had all had before then, like you got the agreement, maybe paid $50 or whatever. But to pay $200 for a phone, that was like, whoa. And this is again before, like iPhones, and this was like the beginning of the smartphone revolution chapter. So things were subsidized with contracts. It kind of guaranteed that you weren't going to just get a new device and bounce to somebody else or bounce somewhere else or disconnect service or what. It kind of was like a cost mitigation tactic. But in 2013, T-Mobile changed how they operated. And I found this great video from March 26, 2013. Their CEO at the time, John Ledger, talking about them getting rid of contracts and going to the Un-carrier. And frankly, I remember at the time it was like, this was blasphemy. Like all the major carriers are like, oh, T-Mobile's going to kill themselves. They're like, oh, they're going out of business. There's no way they can operate. And I think that they changed the landscape of the cell phone industry for the better. And it was part of the reason why. So initially when I left Verizon, I went to Cricket just to kind of get off of Verizon and hang out. And then in 2013, while still working for a Verizon entity, I went to T-Mobile. And I remember a customer once I talked to him on the phone. He's like, oh, you guys work at Verizon. You don't have to worry about anything. You all get free service. And I'm like, actually, I don't get free service. I pay for my own service, and it's with a different carrier. I never told anyone what my carrier was because as fun as it sounded, or like, like, hey, I'm with T-Mobile. I love T-Mobile. Like, I'm not going to, do an employer dirty like that. So I never disclosed to anybody that, who I was paying for the competition. But anyway, so here is a commercial from 2013 when T-Mobile decided to become the Un-carrier and upend the wireless cell phone industry.
Hi, I'm John Ledger. When I came to T-Mobile 6 months ago, I already knew the worst kept secret in the business. I knew the wireless industry was broken, and I had paid the high prices for new phones. I'd signed the contracts that locked me into a network and stuck me with a phone that was outdated long before the contract was up. I wanted to know whether T-Mobile customers felt the same way. So I listened, and it turns out we couldn't agree more. So as of now, today, we're changing the game. First, you've signed your last annual service contract. We're getting rid of them. They're gone. We've created the best upgrade program in the wireless world just for you. No more waiting. Get the phone you want when you want it at the lowest upfront cost. All our new plans are now unlimited talk, text, and web. Unlimited. No more of those ridiculous overages and fees. Next, no more slow, congested networks. We've invested $4 billion to build out a smoking network to make phones even faster. And now for something really big. The smartphone that's redefined and changed the world has come to T-Mobile, the iPhone 5. On T-Mobile's lightning-fast network, you'll get an amazing iPhone 5 experience, crystal clear HD voice calling, and unlimited 4G FaceTime. And listen, we're just getting started here. As a loyal customer, I wanted you to be the first to hear. because this is for you. I'm incredibly excited that together we're going to change this game. And it all starts now.
So that was pretty groundbreaking of T-Mobile to do, to get rid of the contracts, to really redefine what it meant to be a wireless provider and a wireless carrier. And I truly applaud John Ledger and the team at T-Mobile at that time for creating the wireless landscape that we benefit from as customers today. It was a joy to join T-Mobile. I was a post-pay customer on T-Mobile from 2013 until 2017. Then I switched to prepay with T-Mobile, and I was a prepay customer of T-Mobile from 2017 through last month of 2021. So a little bit more now, transitioning into my story as a T-Mobile customer. I think that, again, they're great. They've done a lot of good stuff, but I think that they're starting to get stagnant and they're not keeping up with the latest stuff. I mean, there's only so much that they can do. I see that. But at the same time, so they were the first to get rid of the contracts and, change that stuff. So really, you as a customer started having a lot more ownership of your experience and your time on a carrier. But the prices weren't that cheap. I remember we were paying, me and my former fiance at the time. He was my fiance at the time, but not anymore, obviously. When I say fiance, I don't mean the beautiful Jeremy that is in my life that you guys are aware of now. It was the asshole before. Anyway, prices were still relatively high. I remember I think we were paying like $65, $70 a line. Prices are still that same now. Just looking at their service now so for one line, if you do the magenta, it's $70 a line for a single device. But if you have a family of 4, they magically can give you all of the same features for just $35 a month. I get that. I would want some savings if I'm having a family of 4, because you're still going to be paying a lot of money. For 3 lines, that's $140 a month for cell phones, or for 4 lines. Okay, so I see it, 3rd line free. So it looks like the magic number is 3 lines. Everything over, you kind of get a really big discount on the additional lines. They have a thing up to 5 lines is that only down to $32 an hour, or $32 a line. 3 lines, $40, 2 lines, $60 a line, and 1 line is $70. So my frustration was when I broke up with my then fiance, was I was still on this old plan, like a family plan, and I was grandfathered in. I could keep it, but as soon as I changed it, I got locked out of it. But I was still paying like $70 for my service, and I hardly talked to anybody, hardly did anything. My data was like 2 gigs of data per month, like not much. And I'm mostly on Wi-Fi, and I still don't need like a massive data plan. Like now that we had unlimited. I got rid of the unlimited because it was quite a bit extra, and I wasn't making a whole lot of money at the time. So I was cutting costs and lowered it down to like $60 with a couple gigs for a data plan because we had Wi-Fi at the house. And I was still just frustrated. Like, I'm throwing so much money at it. Granted, they offered some cool things. Like at one point, before I became a prepaid customer, they gave a free share of their stock to all account owners and holders. And since I was the legal owner of our cell phone plan, my former fiance was living across the country, paying for his service, to me, but it was all managed out here out of Idaho, even though he was living on the East Coast at this point. And I got the stock option, and it was really cool, and it was nice, and it was free. It was managed for free. But then, the company that they used to offer the stock, and the stock value was like $100. Like I still wish I had that stock. I was forced to sell it because the company that they partnered with to offer it just wasn't making enough money. It was kind of a good deal at first, but then they realized it wasn't going to make them money because people weren't signing up to have it managed on their own. And I didn't have like a 401k at this point. I didn't have a money market set up, so I really couldn't take ownership of that stock option myself outside of this company. And they wanted to charge a fee, and maybe the fee now would be worth it, but basically it was just going to eat into my earnings on that stock to have it managed by them, because they switched from a free they went to another company, and then this new company was like, oh, we're going to start charging you a percentage. So I wanted to transfer it somewhere else, but it was $100 transfer fee. Like basically the value of the stock is how much they wanted to be able to release the stock. And so I felt like I was forced into selling it. And I feel like that was the first time I was done dirty by T-Mobile. And I was like, okay, well, they can't control the other companies. So, maybe that's out of their control. But the fact that they didn't ask the questions, or the fact that they didn't set it up in the paperwork to make sure that we wouldn't get gouged. Basically it was kind of like, oh, it just felt like a gimmick of, here's a cool stock that you actually, not only are you a customer, but you actually own some say in this company. And it was a nice little token. But then it was kind of like, oh, if you can't, pay to play, then we want our stock back. So ended up losing on that. That kind of really irked me. And then they started doing the whole get thanked. And on T-Mobile Tuesdays, you'd open up the app and they'd have like some sweet promotions, like you get something for free. And initially it was a lot of really cool stuff. Like it was, you didn't want to miss Tuesdays, open up the app and find out what you could get. There had like some games that you could, get a drawing, or extra prizes that were not, universally out there. And several times, like they'd offer some like free meal deal at Panda Express, and it crashed Panda Express's websites because they just couldn't handle the influx of traffic from T-Mobile customers. And so I think it became a situation where these companies wanted to participate because it's like basically free advertising, but at the same time, it came with some other stuff. So I think it became kind of a hindrance to actually be part of these T-Mobile Tuesdays, and companies kind of really didn't want to put themselves out there, open themselves up to liability or exposure or weaknesses in their systems, because people would call it out. Like, hey, T-Mobile just crashed Panda Express. And then they would have to offer that deal the next week just for the customers that didn't get a chance to do it. And then they started offering things where, like, here's when it gets released. You have to claim it on Tuesday, but you have up to a week to use it. Kind of like spread it out, because like on these Tuesdays, people were just like flooding Domino's or flooding Panda Express to get these free things. And that's kind of a crapshoot if you're an employee of one of those restaurants and suddenly you're getting customers that otherwise wouldn't be coming to you because they're getting some free thing. And it's like, well, this kind of backfired. Thanks, employer. So anyway, the T-Mobile Tuesdays have become real lackluster. It's the same, 10 cents off a gallon of gas at Shell. Well, I'm sorry, but Shell gas is kind of meh. It just became not really worth it to open up the apps anymore. And then they would do like Dunkin' Donuts and all these different like food things or movie passes for companies that aren't even on the West Coast. I've never heard of them. And a lot of them, like when you Google them, they're on the East Coast, and I just feel like it just exacerbated a divide. It felt like if you lived in a East Coast metro section, T-Mobile Tuesday was meant for you. But if you lived in Boise, Idaho or Portland, Oregon, good luck finding anything meaningful from it. I really feel personally that John Ledger leaving T-Mobile was a demise for T-Mobile. I think he wanted to retire. It's whatever it is. It's fine that he left. That's his prerogative. But I feel like T-Mobile without him is not the T-Mobile that we all loved, or that really made them the groundbreaker that they were. So I was kind of getting, what's the word? Like kind of disenchanted by T-Mobile's offerings. And then I started looking at Verizon, and things aren't that much more comparable. The basic plan on Verizon is $70. And that's, you look at all the features that they offer, like it only offers one of the 5G option, not the 5G ultra wideband. That's an additional $10 a month for that. And then it has like the free services where it's like Hulu, Disney Plus, ESPN, which is great if you don't have those things, but we already pay for those. So I don't need them. I just want really good service at an affordable price. That's all I think that all these wireless providers should be doing. And again, you get the discount if you have, breeder syndrome, where you are popping out tons of kids or have a massive family that you can be like, hey, mom, dad, brother, sister, like if you can get everybody onto the same plan, then sure, you can get a steal of a deal. 4 lines of the basic service on Verizon is $35 a month, which is good. But it begs the question, why do people that are single, or who, like, if your sibling is married and has their own family, you don't want to be on their plan. You don't want to take away your ability to benefit from your own plan, from the ownership of your services, or have, that, have the credit liability on you. Like if you finance your phone, that's part of your credit. But if you finance a phone on your sibling's plan and then you stiff them on the bill or whatever, it's on their credit. Like, we need to have the ability to, everybody needs to be able to own their stuff. And it's just kind of a slap in the face that they can offer, these carriers can offer service for as low as $30 a month, yet that same service is double if you're single or aren't attached to a bunch of people. And so that's when I switched to T-Mobile prepaid. It was, I want to say it was like $45 originally. And it was, I think, 10 gigs of data, which was double the $60 plan that I saw on postpay. So I was like, there's that kind of weird like mental stigma of, I'm a prepaid customer versus postpay. Like one's better than the other. Like you're still paying for the service. You're still paying to play. Either way, postpay is you pay for your service ahead of time. Plus then you pay for anything the next month. If you went over the past month, then you pay for it in the next month. It's all it is billing. But I was like, I can have the same service on T-Mobile, still keep the T-Mobile Tuesdays, all this stuff for half the price in a plan that more closely fits my needs. And I was still only using like 2 gigs out of the 10 gig allowance. So I don't need unlimited. I really don't. But I was going after the price. But things changed. So I switched to, I called them up. I said, hey, I'd like to switch my account from postpaid to prepaid. They did some weird things on their side. My phone went down for a bit. They brought it back up, and I was now a prepaid customer. There's still like artifacts in my account that show from my post-pay days. Like it said, my password hadn't been updated since 2015, even though it was 2 years later. Like it just, so there were like relics. And I think maybe part of my frustration was the fact that my account was switched from post-pay to prepay. Maybe that confused their system, and their system wasn't designed to do that. I had no controls on their website. It felt like I was a second class wireless customer. There were things that I could see on the My T-Mobile account site that I'd click on it and it'd be like, hello, prepaid customer, please call this number. And I don't know, I didn't have any controls over thing. And the layout wasn't intuitive or nice. It just felt very clunky. It felt like they were, just appeasing me by still being an option, but they really wanted me to be a post-pay customer at double the price. So that became very frustrating. And then, T-Mobile Tuesday started lacking, and it was just like, why am I staying here? And then 5G came. I decided to jump out of Android, and I got my first iPhone. For years, I swore I would never join Apple, and I think that Apple is very overpriced, but they also have some really good devices. So I had known a lot of people that had made the switch, and plus there's a lot of security things that just I had seen with Android that don't exist on Apple, and I was like, you know what? My biggest complaint with the Samsung S8 that I had, it was great. It was a good phone. I had Samsung the last couple of smartphones that I bought, but the pictures just seemed lacking. When I was, with my sister who had an iPhone, and she would take a picture and I could take a picture of the same thing, and both the pictures looked good. Her pictures on her iPhone just looked extra good. Like you could see lines on things. And from a distance, the Samsung pictures looked good, but I noticed that like try to imagining like a basketball, the little bumps on a basketball. It was like on a Samsung, you could see that it was a basketball. It was orange. It had the lines, like you could see the ridges. It was detailed enough to where you knew for sure that was a basketball. But something about the depth perception of an iPhone, or the way their software works with the hardware, something about iPhone, that same angle, same picture of the basketball had, like, you could see like the actual edges of every bump. You can see the grooves on a pumpkin. Like it just wasn't blurred, And so I was like, you know what? That is my deciding factor. There's a lot of things that iPhones can't do that I used to be able to do on my Samsung. And slowly Apple's catching up. And so I feel like there's a lot to be said for, there are some things that they're behind on. But when it came to the end of the day, and you all knew that, like, I lost my dog, I cherished the pictures I took of him. I've cherished the pictures, and the deciding factor for me was the pictures. The camera is the most critical part to me of a smartphone. Those pictures are yours. You can get new phones later on. You can have new cell phone plans, whatever. Life moves forward, but the thing that you will hang on forever is the moment you captured with the camera on your phone. That picture is permanent. Unless it gets deleted, but that picture is yours. You move to the next phone, but that moment is sealed with the technology, with the device that you took it on. And so that was why I went to Apple. Also, it was nice that, 5G was starting to kind of launch, and I was like, cool, I'm going to get this iPhone 12 and I can be on 5G. Like, I'm setting myself to join the current state of wireless. Well, T-Mobile activated 5G in like January of this year in the Boise area, and it had its growing pains and issues. It would say 5G, but it was, I would say, dial-up was faster. It wouldn't work. So I constantly had to be on Wi-Fi, and the cell service was really marginal. And, I get that there's issues with deployment and they got to tweak things, so I'm not totally faulting them. The issue that I had, though, was that whenever I'd complain, it was always the can oh, we'd love to help you. We want you to have good service. Send us a message. And then I'd message it, and they're like, oh, it looks like your area is going through some upgrades. Okay. But by the 4th month of hearing that, I finally had to get to the point where I went through the cellular settings in my iPhone and I disabled the 5G capability. Because even though it was supposed to automatically switch from 5G to 4G depending on which service was better, something was tricking the iPhone into thinking that 5G was amazing, full bars, great service, so it would sit on 5G, but then when you'd go to load something, it just wouldn't load. Things didn't happen. And I wasn't alone. I talked to other T-Mobile customers. They had the same issue, but we were all getting the runaround. And so I for months just operated my phone on 4G LTE service because that was the only thing that worked outside of the house. So finally I was like, why am I paying $40 in prepay service for this system that isn't working half the time? And I started looking at other carriers, even, carriers that operate on the big networks, the Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T. I forget what they're called. Like Mint Mobile and all those. Anyway, so one that I had just heard about, and I was like, oh, what? They started getting my attention, but I also hesitant, oh, you're not part of, the big name. And, I don't want to, switch and then be like, oh, this is a mistake. So I really wanted to vet out the process. I did months of reading and watching reviews and seeing, how Mint Mobile worked. Was it worth it? All this jazz. And, let me find. You may remember that last week I did a pretty good episode about wireless providers and my experience. Well, my wireless experience evolved today, and unfortunately it took a turn for the worst. I freely and uncompensadedly recommended Visible Wireless to you, to my listeners. And as part of my core values, I believe in trust and honesty. And unfortunately, something happened on Visible by Verizon's side today. Today was a very bad day in tech. If you're kind of lost, today is October 4th, 2021. Facebook and Instagram went down. Remember, everything was kind of oh my God, what did we do with ourselves? Well, I took a drive yesterday up to Oregon, visited my sister, had a great day. It was fun. Got back around midnight, texted my parents, said, hey, I'm back home, good to go. Apparently 6 minutes after I got home, Visible Verizon Wireless decided to take my cell phone offline. I don't know why. I was paid in full, prepaid. I ported my number to them 20 days ago. There was no pending issue. I'm on auto pay. But at 12:25 a.m., I got an email saying, your new number is this. And it was the number that I originally had when I was testing out Visible Wireless. And it said goodbye, and then gave my actual cell phone number that I've had since 2005. And that was after I had contacted someone thinking that it was some national communications internet outage issue. And we tried resetting the wireless settings on my phone. We tried reprovisioning the eSIM, which is a joke, by the way. Their eSIM process, if you do go with Visible because whatever reason, of your own choice and not my recommendation, their eSIM process is a joke. Do not do it. If you're going to go with Visible Wireless, you need to do it the classic way and get a SIM card, especially if you have an iPhone. I don't know what the problem is, but I've had nothing but problems. It was a red flag when I first attempted to activate their service because it didn't work right away when their claim was, oh, you can be online in as little as 15 minutes. No, that first time it was down for 2 days before they could figure out what happened. Anyway, at midnight last night, they disconnected the number that I've had since 2005. It was inoperable. Claimed that the number that I originally started was my new number. Then 9 hours later, I get another email at 9 in the morning saying the opposite, that the old number is now disconnected and the number that I have had since 2005 was my new number. But the thing was, neither number worked. My phone just said no service all day long. At 7:30 p.m., I finally got an email from the executive relations team. Someone by the name of Nikki said, oh, we're actively working on it. And then 20 minutes later, oh, it should be working. Please power cycle your device and then confirm that it's working. I will give them credit. They made it right. My phone number is working inbound, outbound. I verified that when I call my phone number, my phone rings. But to say this was a troubling experience is I'm at a loss for words. You get what you pay for. $25 is a steal of a deal. The Verizon network is a great and solid network. But the stress today of not having an active cell phone, of only having the option for an online chat session where I started out each time as number 48, and it took forever to finally get somebody. Not having someone to call and actually get to talk to somebody until I finally got that email from the executive relations team offering a phone number because they were working on it after I blasted them several times on Twitter. And let's not forget twice, Verizon people offered, they said, hey, we're sorry to hear this, reach out. And so I was like, oh, that's odd. Visible's a sub carrier of theirs. So that's whatever, but maybe they're the same company in the backside, so maybe they really can do something. So I contacted them after being told by the Verizon customer service, hey, reach out to us. So I told them, and they're like, oh, do you have service with Visible? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, well, I'm glad that they're taking care of it. We can't really do anything. It's like, do you people even read the tweets and the complaints and the frustration? Do you actually care about the customer? It feels like to me, Visible is another gimmick by Verizon Wireless. It's a V-Wireless scam. They're trying to get people who can't afford the $90 a month for bougie, pretentious, business class service of Verizon. They're taking advantage of people who want good service at a low cost. They're taking advantage of people who can't afford the bougie price tag. The people who don't want to blow hundreds of dollars a month for a cell phone service. I'm going back to postpay with T-Mobile, and I have ordered a new SIM card because guess what? I was so committed to Visible, I threw away my T-Mobile SIM card that I've had since 2015, 2013. I don't know how long I had that thing, but I was like, you know what? I don't need this. Visible's so great. I probably could be back on T-Mobile tonight if I had that SIM card. But no, I had to jump through all the hoops and get my credit checked, unlock my credit so that they could do all the analysis on me and everything and get me going. And by Thursday, I'll hopefully have a new SIM card. And by the end of the month, the week of my wedding, I will not be a Visible wireless customer anymore. That was a mistake. I just wanted to let you know that Visible destroyed a otherwise beautiful podcast episode last week. It really pains me to have to tear that down, to take it off. It was a nice length. It was perfect. I loved the text in it. I just loved the way it was structured and built. I was happy to put my best forward for a company that I thought was giving me their best. But unfortunately, that company failed. It's my duty to let you know what happened. It's my obligation to be honest with you and let you know that I was taken advantage of. I was led astray by Visible by Verizon. It was something too good to be true. So if you hear any other reviews about them on YouTube or otherwise, I will say everything negative that all the other people reviewed on, I had those same experiences as well. This is new. I haven't heard anything like this from anybody, but I can't see anybody who has survived what I just went through with them who would want to be part of that carrier and be powerless and zero accountability from anybody on their side. So shout out to T-Mobile for being the uncarrier and the original player in being transparent and offering a good affordable rate on stuff. Maybe they can get their 5G situation straightened out here in the Boise area. And that was really the only complaint that I had with T-Mobile. So my apologies if T-Mobile felt bashed. It was not my intent to bash them, but it's definitely my intent to bring light to the shortcomings and failings of Visible by Verizon. I hope you have a great day. Thank you for following the podcast. Again, I am sorry if I led you to consider Visible Wireless. I'm sorry if you signed up with or without my promotional code. And if you are with Visible, I hope you have a better experience than I did. But today, I'm done. I'm out. I hope that really gave you some insight. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for listening to my cell phone saga. Nice long episode. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And again, I want to thank you for inviting me into your space, into your time, and letting me share my thoughts on wireless.
Thank you for listening to Everything with Everett. Connect with Everett and other listeners on Facebook and Twitter at Everett Podcast. Everett would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts by emailing mystory@everettpodcast.com. You can also leave a voicemail or send a text message to 208-391-2808. Choose to listen, speak with kindness, and have a great day.